This is Travis Bliss, and my article was Analysis of Trends in High School Students' Math and Science Course Attainment and Registrations in Texas. Okay, the information about the article that I read, the who, what, when, why. Who, it was every demographic imaginable. They actually did the analysis over the entire Texas public school system, and they looked at African Americans, Hispanics, whites, Pacific Islanders, Marshallese, every kind of girls, boys, gifted and talented classes, on-level classes, etc. Anyway, what made this test unique, or this analysis unique to me, was that they looked at specifically the standardized test scores in math and science. And I teach math, and so therefore I keyed in on that. The study has been a very long, ongoing study. It started back in 1997, so over 20 years ago. The article itself was written in 2016. And the reason why that the article was written and the research was done and compiled was they were trying to determine if there was any kind of trends in high school students' test scores. And obviously, if you're able to find the trends that exist, whether they be good, bad, or indifferent or otherwise, you can make progress within your school system based on those numbers, if there is numbers that are conclusively definable as something that should be improved upon. Two things that jumped out on the analysis that I read and that the authors believed were important as well, and that's the reason why I dug into this particular article, that of all the demographics, the Hispanic population within the school system was explosively growing over the last 21 years. The analysis went through the last 21 years, but I know specifically within the school that I teach, which is right here in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, our demographic has flipped. It's now what's called a minority majority, because there's now more Hispanic students in the school system than any other demographic, more than whites, more than African Americans, more than Pacific Islanders, Marshallese, Native Americans, etc. And we just hit that threshold this school year. Texas, on the other hand, the whole entire state of Texas's public school system is now majority of the student population is Hispanic. So the reason why that jumped out is because the other demographics stayed fairly flatline. There was no dramatic increase or decrease in whites, Pacific Islanders, Marshallese, Native Americans, African Americans, any other population. Only the Hispanic population was the increase so dramatic. So that's number one. Number two, it was the Hispanic population's test scores in math and science were significantly lower by 34% on average on standardized test scores than any other, than the Asian and white demographic. The only demographic lower than Hispanics on the standardized test were the African American demographic, but their population is not growing at a rate at all in comparison to any other demographics, and therefore does not impact the overall school averages and scores as dramatically. Nothing has impacted the school's standardized test scoring as much as the growth of the Hispanic population and the low numbers of standardized test scores that are being turned in by this demographic. So, that being said, one other graph I'll show on this next slide here is that, like I mentioned, males and females, flatline. There was no discernible difference in physics, and these were all the math and sciences. The physics, the calculus. This particular graph I pulled up here was on calculus, because you would think at the upper ends of mathematics you might see a difference in the gifted classes, or males and females, or anything else, but there wasn't, which was kind of interesting. So the female male part didn't matter. The gifted didn't matter. The only thing that stood out was the Hispanic populations, whether they were in gifted or on level or integrated classes, it was consistently lower. And one of the things that the author kind of pontificated about was that, well, it's the only demographic that by and large physically moves. Other demographics, whites, whites, Asians, Native Americans, African Americans, all grew up within the American school system. It may not have been the Oklahoma school system, but typically it was a American school system. The Hispanics, on the other hand, they saw a large number that were transient or that came from Honduras, Mexico, South America, and they believe that may have something to do with them learning the actual math and sciences, because we don't know exactly how it's being taught in Honduras or Puerto Rico or South America or Tijuana or wherever they may be migrating from. So that's number one. Number two is English is required on the test questions here, whereas obviously Spanish is, they speak Spanish in Tijuana, for example, or Puerto Rico, and they use the Spanish language on their test to ask the question. So if a student comes into the 9th grade and he or she has been within the school system out of the country with a completely different language other than English, learning math, and then they're dropped into a 9th or 10th grade math class and said, here you go, learn this information. By the way, all the questions are going to be written in English. The textbook's in English. Your teacher's going to be speaking English. That in itself could be a very good reason why they're struggling with the math and science scores. The relationship that I had to this particular analysis was that I teach math. My caseload, I have 43 current EL students. EL stands for English Language Learners. That means that they pick that a questionnaire goes out to them and their family saying, what is your number one language you wish to speak and wish to listen to and understand and hear and learn by? And if they pick anything other than English, then they are considered an English language learner, which means English is their second, third, fourth, or maybe non-even language. I work with an English language or EL teacher who is bilingual in Spanish and I think Vietnamese and Korean. By far and away, the Hispanic population, especially with this analysis, that report that I was doing, was what we were focusing on, because there's such a little number of any other demographic that it makes it difficult to even financially procure teachers that speak all the other languages. So we focus primarily, like I said, on the majority of the population being the Hispanic population. We focus on Spanish speakers. Anyway, and the population now, it's a majority, like I mentioned earlier, our test scores down. So it's become such an important issue that even on Friday, the EL teacher, the director of EL, met with those particular students in my class and said, guys, look, we have a belief that you're cheating in the class, and we need you to stop because the tests are rolling out in a week or two, finals, and are going to impact your grade tremendously, and you can't, quote unquote, cheat on those tests. And well, what I asked her what she meant by cheating, because I didn't notice any cheating, and she goes, well, they're getting the homework, they're looking at it and going, I don't understand what this says. So they're asking their friend that sits beside him, what does this say? And he'll tell them in Spanish what the question is, and they'll go, oh, okay, and they'll answer it. Well, during the test, they won't let us use interpreters. The test is in English. They have to read it in English on their own. They can't ask their neighbor. If they do that in the test, we have to cancel their test out, give them a 0, and escort them from the room. The English language learner teacher, she can't interpret the test for them. So yeah, I don't know if I didn't consider that cheating on their homework, because to me they were just asking for help from their neighbor, and their neighbor was telling them what the question was, and then now they know how to do the problem. But like she said, they have to put it in that terms so the students know they can't do that on the test. There's no other way around it. So then again, that's another difficulty. That's another thing that we're running into, and that's difficult, and that's, I'm sure, impacted on this analysis that I read. Okay, the relationship to the textbook. Textbook specifically, and this is basically the whole entire textbook, was talking about determined measurement outcomes. Well, what are we trying to test here? Are we trying to test their ability to do math, or are we trying to test their ability to read English? And that's kind of where I come in, because their academic language versus their English spoken language or their daily language are two different things. by far and away, the students that I have and the majority of people that were studied in this analysis, they could do fine with what they call everyday language, ordering food, getting to school, getting home from school, not running in the hallways, knowing how to find the classroom, doing just daily activities. But when it came to actually trying to study and learn and understand academic language, congruent triangles, complementary, supplementary, Pythagorean theorem, that really threw them. So one of the things that they're looking at, and they try to look at in this analysis, is how much of these test scores are impacted by their ability to understand, learn, read, and work in academic language versus just completely not understanding. And I think with the relationship to the textbook, again, is that we have to find a way to accurately test the subject. If we're testing math, I think we really need to focus on the math. And for example, with math, I taught them how to find area of a rectangle. Length times width. I think we've all heard that one a million times. Length times width, or a room, a floor. Length times width. So I showed them on the board. I gave them a worksheet on it. They did it. They got help from their neighbor, quote unquote, cheated with their neighbor. The neighbor read the thing. But they got 89% on the homework. And I called them up one at a time and said, here's, 10 is L, 30 is W. What is that? 300. They put it in the calculator. 300. Okay. Standardized test came out. They gave me the test. I gave it to the students. The question was, Billy owns a lawn care service. He mows yards in the summer. He charges by the area of the yard. The yard is 10 by 40 feet. How much does he charge for this yard? And this is a multiple choice answer. So it was 400 inches, 400 feet, 400 yards, 50 feet. So because some will add it for some reason, because it's not just, hey, this is over area, test. There's 3 or 4 different topics on there. So anyway, and then, of course, the one gives the measurement in yard. It's the right number. 10 times 4 is 40. Or I'm sorry, 10 times 40 is 400. But it says yards in the answer. And I even saw in pencil where they'd circled on the question yards, and then they came down in the answer and circled yards. And yeah, that's it, because it both says yards, and the number, when you multiply it together, is yards. And see, to me, that's not... I don't really agree with that testing. Yeah, for a kid who grew up speaking English and reading and writing English and understand, going through primary, pre-K up through 8th, 9th, 10th grade, reading and writing English, that may not be a problem. Oh, look, it asked for the question in feet. He's mowing yards, as in grass is a yard. I don't know. I just think we got to get better at accurately testing the subject. Focus on the vocabulary is what we need to do. We got to advocate as teachers for test improvement, like I just mentioned there. Get better test what they're actually trying to learn, and advocate classroom composition. I think we really need to get away from this. Every hour of the day, I got 7 to 11 kids who are English language learners, which means they have a hard time understanding English, reading and writing in English, and then the other half of the class is fine in English. And so I'm talking to them, and then you hear the interpreter talking to Spanish, then they're talking to Spanish to each other, and then I'm talking to the student and saying, no, what you need to do for the circle is find the radius squared, and then I hear them interpret it in Spanish, and then the Spanish student or the Hispanic student asks me something in Spanish, and I don't know what he's saying, and so his interpreter asks me, and I tell them, and then the English student says, what are they saying? And I think we need to have just one EL class. Everybody in this class has English as a second language. Now let's focus on how to teach this class the best we can, versus you're fine with your English, you just need help with math. You're struggling with English, you need help with math, all within 55 minutes a day. Anyway, that's my presentation. Hope you liked it and learned something from it.